And joining us on the line now is legal analyst Joe DiGenova. Joe, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is the first Monday in October. That means the Supreme Court is back in action. The Supremes are back. It looks like what they have on tap now on the docket is not all that interesting, but there's the same-sex marriage issue, which many people believe they will take up. Do you think they'll take it up?
Yes, I think they will. I think they're going to be forced to by different decisions by different federal circuits. And by different federal judges, so I think they're going to have to deal with it. They've already dealt with it partially in the Defense of Marriage Act, where they struck down the provisions which said you could not recognize them for purposes of federal benefits. So they've opened the door to a broader ruling dealing with the constitutionality of same-sex marriage.
Right now there is no split decision because all the appeal rulings thus far have banned.
That's correct.
Same-sex
but there are two
marriage.
circuits where there may be split decisions coming down, the Sixth and the Fifth Circuits, where the oral arguments seem to indicate that the courts were going to go in favor of the ban on a states' rights question.
Yeah. So you think when that happens, then the Supremes will step in?
Yep, I think they will. They may not necessarily want to, but they've opened the door themselves by ruling the way they did and the kind of language that Justice Kennedy used, where he called people opposed to gay marriage mean-spirited. It was pretty nasty, rotten thing for him to do, and we'll see if he shapes up.
Well, all right. So, Joe, turning to the other big story that's in the news these days, and that's the Ebola outbreak that we've seen down in Dallas. A lot of people are raising questions about what the government can do. Many people are saying let's restrict travel to those nations. And also in terms of the forced quarantine of individuals down in Dallas. And a lot of the family members of this guy are complaining about it. What can the government do with regard to the public health issues here? And what should they be doing for that matter?
This is an area where the government can do practically anything it wants, and we have a very good precedent in the United States. Believe it or not, one of the first acts ever passed by our new Congress in 1796 was a quarantine law to deal with yellow fever outbreaks.
Wow.
We have a long history of federal health and state power to stop the spread of disease. It is one of these areas where the courts have basically said that the government, in the face of such health threats, can do whatever it wants. There's current law. It's called the Public Health Service Act. It was enacted using the powers of the Commerce Clause. There is currently an executive order which exists giving the president the power to ban travel, to ban movement, and one of the diseases which is listed under that executive order are viral hemorrhagic fevers, of which Ebola is one. So there can be travel bans. They can stop cars. They can stop buses. They can stop planes. They can stop boats. They can quarantine people getting off of boats and planes. The problem is this administration and its head of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, have indicated no desire to use any of these powers and to dumb down the public conversation by acting as if there's no big deal, that everything's under control. What the American people need from the government in a time like this is the truth and bluntness, and they're not getting it, and shame on the CDC.
You know what? It's been pointed out on this program that if there were to be, God forbid, an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease in Canada, that the first thing we would do is say no cattle can enter the country from Canada.
That's right.
But in a situation like this, we don't take that kind of action. It's sort of shocking.
Try to bring a dog into the country from overseas.
Yeah, I know.
9 weeks of quarantine. The bottom line is the CDC for years has been a very politically driven institution. For those who don't remember, way back when HIV/AIDS broke out, the CDC spent almost 2 years telling people that the gay community was not the problem, or that they didn't have a problem, or they shouldn't be worried, when in fact the source of the problem and the place where the greatest vulnerability for illness was the gay community. They lost about 2 years because of political correctness. The problem with the CDC, in many instances, they do some very good work, but at the leadership level, very political, and that's bad for public health.
So given that, and let me just pull on this thread a little bit more, because I find it fascinating, and I think this is what's on people's minds, Joe DiGenova. Yesterday, Dr. Thomas Frieden, he gave a press conference about Ebola, and he was asked specifically about this. And he said, there are Americans who have the right of return and many other people that have the right to enter this country. Is he right about that?
People do not have a right to enter this country who are not U.S. citizens. People who are, for example, permanent residents don't have a right to return. People who are citizens do, in fact, have a right to return, and they have to be admitted, but they also must be admitted under quarantine. There's nothing that anybody coming back into the country can do. But remember, when you come across the border, you're searched whether you're an American citizen or not.
Right.
But he is wrong. There are not people who have a, quote, right to return to the United States who are not citizens. They do not even diplomats have a right to return to the United States. They can be stopped at the border and told to go home.
Sure, we just actually kept Venezuelan diplomats from coming into the country, and I remember
Correct.
just about a year and a half ago.
Correct. Dr. Frieden is now trying to do something which is very bad for public health. He's trying to he's worried about what he calls panic, nonsense. What causes panic is lying. And that's what the CDC and a lot of people in government are doing. They're lying about the percentages and the prospects here. They also don't want to offend African countries. The fact that this is a disease which comes from West Africa is causing all of these people in the administration to worry about not looking like they're coming down hard on an African country. It is absolutely disgraceful that they even have these thoughts in their mind. There's one job they have is to prevent the spread of this disease, and if that means stopping flights, banning flights, stopping people at the borders for examinations and quarantine, that's exactly what they should be doing. And if this thing spreads, let me tell you, there will be a post-mortem, you should pardon the expression,
yes,
that will be awful about what the public health authorities at the federal level did. This is too political right now and not enough public medicine.
Yeah, it seems like the president, this is really not a legal analysis, it's more a political analysis, but it seems that the president has a very difficult choice to make. He can either take an action that will be perceived as protecting the American people, or he can take no action, and that will be perceived as protecting his relationship with Western African nations.
That's exactly right. And a very little-known fact, President Bush proposed a set of stringent travel bans with draft regulations shortly before he left office. President Obama, in 2010, about a year after being president, negated all of those regulations. That's going to be looked into by Congress. If this thing goes south, the refusal to implement the new travel bans that Bush had proposed by regulation and the repeal of those by Obama in 2010 is going to take on a great, great amount of importance.
All right.
Always good stuff. Thank you, Joe DiGenova. We've got to leave it there.